everyone's time. I just want to go ahead and kick off the call. As a reminder, these calls are for the transit systems and are not intended for the press. They will be recorded for future viewing, and questions in the slides will also be posted at the end of this presentation. I also would like to thank all of you who participated this morning on our second Working on It NC Transit Cares meeting. It was very well attended. We had over 100 participants. So I do appreciate all of you taking the time to participate in those calls, because we really do want your feedback on these efforts moving forward. Okay, so just to start us off as we normally do, I'm going to give you an update on the CARES Act summary. I'm also going to go over a little bit more information about the change request information that you need to make sure that you're doing when you're submitting those change orders, and then also go over the AdTap application process. So at this point, we have 77 claims submitted. This represents a little over $7.9 million in claims, and we've paid out $5.5 million. So again, I want to encourage you, I know the last two calls we've talked about the importance of drawing down those funds as quickly as possible. If you've got claims that can be submitted, please go ahead and do so. They do not have to wait, by quarter. You can do them, up to once per month if necessary. For the phase 2 of the CARES Act funding, to be able to access these additional funds, you do need to submit a change order in EBS to generate a supplemental agreement. One of the things that I do want to know is that you must have an initial agreement in place before you can submit your change order. This is especially important because there are currently 8 systems that do not have initial agreements. So if you do not have an initial agreement and you're submitting a change order, we can't process that until the original agreement is processed. So please, if you've got some reason why you have not signed off on those original agreements, let us know so we can help you resolve those issues so you can draw down those CARES Act funding. I also want to make you aware that a change order cannot happen if there is a pending claim in process. So you can only do one or the other. So if you submitted a change order and you also had a pending claim submitted at the same time, one or the other needs to be pulled from the system for us to be able to process. And do not forget to include fair revenue through June 30th, 2021 when you're doing your update to your budget. And I've got a couple of examples here to explain to you why that's so important. So in this first example, we have your initial distribution is $130,000. And your supplemental agreement was for $217,000, which means that you should have a total budget of CARES Act funding of $348,000. However, if you do not increase your supplemental value by the expected fares, then when you take your total budget and you show your fair revenue, you're actually only going to be able to draw down or have access to $323,000. So this is where it's very, very important for you to ensure that you are estimating your fares. And this can be seen in the next example where, again, their initial distribution was the same amount. Their supplemental was that $217,000 plus the $25,000 that they expected in fares. So their total budget shows as being greater, but when you draw it down, the fares, your net expenses or your total amount in CARES funding is the $348,000 that you're eligible to request. So do factor in fares. It's better for you to overestimate fares to ensure that you are able to maximize access to all of your funding. Oops, sorry. The AdTap CARES was approved on August 25th. You should have received your amount via email. You will need to go in and enter an application in for this funding. This application will be based on the same template as what was used for the 5311 CARES. It just requires us to do a new application because it's a different funding source. These contracts will be processed after supplemental contracts are done or when we're able to fit them in. So I don't want you to delay submitting those applications. Just realize that we are going to prioritize the phase 1 and phase 2 funding over the AdTap. We still have not heard any additional word on the 5307 GA funds. As soon as we hear something, we will let you know. Most of those applications have been submitted and are at the level of processing, waiting for that final approval by FTA so we can go ahead and take the next step. On the DHHS funding, I just want to give you an update as to where we are in the process of administering those funds. So we have come to agreement that the funds will be administered and managed by the Integrated Mobility Division, and we are finalizing the MOU between NCDOT and DHHS to allow us to do that. Agreements with systems will be based on this MOU, and this MOU basically covers more stuff than it needs to for you guys, but it defines what eligible trips types there are, and it also defines the period of performance from March 20th to December 20th. Excuse me, March 2020 to December 2020. Just to give you a little background onto the funding shortfall discussion, we received 30 responses. Thank you for everyone who did respond. I just want to highlight how important it is for us to receive responses. Hopefully we will have a longer lead time in future requests, but it's important for us to not only get responses from the CT systems, but also from the urban systems. You know, while we are not the ones who are administering, you know, your funds, it is important for us to help get those values in there to show the total picture and the total impact from COVID onto all systems across the state. Just to reiterate, you know, the more data we have, the better we are able to do analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and summarize on the next slides a few of the results that we got from those 30 responses. So comparing fiscal year 19 fourth quarter to fiscal year 20 fourth quarter, we are still seeing about a 50% loss in local revenues, a 55% trip reduction, 17% reduction in expenses overall, which is you know, you would expect to be if you're doing fewer trips to see a reduction in expenses. But if you can see that those percentages are greatly different, and that basically means that there is an increase in the cost per trip, and you see that right there as 84% increase in the cost per trips. I just wanted to also note that there is a wide variation in some of the responses that we received from systems. Some systems are seeing very little impact, you know, to revenue, ridership, and expenses, while others are seeing significant impact. And this again just highlights why it's important for us to get as complete data from as many systems as possible, because if those who are reporting are the ones who are either more affected versus less affected, then it's going to skew the results. And we want to make sure that we are giving a clear picture of the impacts. And, you know, we are, you know, we can, you know, shift the analysis or band the analysis by system size and, you know, rural versus urban and, you know, location across the state. But it's easier if we can, you know, have that data up front to make those analysis and those decisions. So overall, the analysis estimates that CT systems and urban systems will have a budget shortfall in fiscal year 21 without any additional ROPES math or other funding. And this is assuming, of course, that ridership and revenue continue to be down and cost per trip continue to be up throughout fiscal year 21. And these assumptions are, again, one of the reasons why we will have additional requests for information moving forward. We anticipate that we will continue to get requests for impacts of COVID moving forward, and we're really going to rely upon the systems to provide that, that information. The shortfall for CT systems can largely be offset with the remaining CARES Act funding, but there may be a small hole, especially in trips that are not eligible for CARES Act funding. The difference between, for SMAP, there may be, more of an impact. Again, we would have liked to have gotten some additional impact, or excuse me, information from the urban systems to help define that shortfall. If you have any additional questions, or if you want to continue to provide us information, please do so, and you can follow up with any questions or concerns you have with that data. My understanding is that we will be making that available to the systems to review. So if you see any, glaring holes or oversights, in our analysis, we welcome the opportunity to receive feedback and improve the analysis that we're using, because this is information that we are sharing with upper management within NCDOT and as requested by others throughout state government. Just as a reminder, the virtual training series is going to start September 22nd. This is primarily for new people into transit or people who need a refresher. It's going to be held every Tuesday and Thursday between September 22nd and October 15th, starting at 10 a.m. each day. All of those sessions will be recorded and will be available for viewing at a later date. The registration link will go out tomorrow with more details, and meeting information will be provided by email after registration. I just wanted to give another shout out to those who may need masks. At this point, all requested masks have been sent out. We do still have over 3,500 masks remaining. So if you need masks, please contact your IMD. And again, if you just happen to have photos of staff or riders, wearing the masks and on the buses, please share those with us as well so we can forward them on to FTA. So I am now moving to the last section, which is questions. And Blair, I'll turn it back over to you to be able to show what's in the chat box. All right, so the first question is, if we project our fares too low, can we do a change order later on to increase the fare amount? Myra, I'm not sure if you're on or not, so I'll let you, if you are, I'll let you answer. But we talked about this earlier, and my recommendations are to estimate your fares, per a typical year, pre-COVID. That way it should give you enough buffer if your fares are to increase back up to the normal level. But if you're on Myra, I'm not sure if they can do another change order. Okay.
I am here. Hello, everyone. You can do a change request, but we ask that you go ahead at this point, since everyone is required to do a change request to accept the additional funds. It's best to increase your fares at this time So what happens is if you run out of fares during the course of submitting your claim, you must reduce your expenditures to offset the fares that you collected. So that's why it's best to go ahead and put a change request now so you can report accurately. Because otherwise, we can't process that claim if you have fares and you didn't take them out. Then we're gonna have to send it back to you and ask you to submit a change request at that time. So it's the best to put it in your change request now. Ask for as much as you can that you think will take you through June 30th, and we will proceed. After that, everything should it'll work out better for you after that.
Okay, so is the CARES, next question is the CARES funding replacing 5310 funds for fiscal year 21 since our 5310 budget was included in our CARES allocation? Again, what I'm showing you or what we showed you previously with respect to your second allocation is the methodology we use to determine that second allocation. The purpose and the eligibility of the CARES Act funding remains the same. It is, in the case of the money that we administer, it's 5311 general public. It's either 5307 or it's 5311 general public. But that number, that 5310 and your SMAP and your rope and all of those things that were used, your concept, those things that were used to calculate how much money that you needed does not mean that those funds will not be available for fiscal year 21. It's just how we used, Blair likes the ends. It's how we how we determined how much each system should get. If we need assistance with any of the funding issues, do we work with our new MDS or continue where we were with the old one? As of September 1st, we do encourage you to start working with your new MDS. However, if you're in a process and you have been working on an issue with your previous MDS, I would like you to kind of, you can continue until you wrap up that issue. But I would ask you to, at the very minimum, CC your new MDS on any correspondence so they can be brought up to speed on all issues. What is the 5311 CARES award period of performance? Based on FTA info, there is a 2-year period of performance, January 20th to January 20th, 22. But on the original NCDOT 5311 award letter, it said it was from 1/20 to June 30th, 21.
I will speak on that.
Thank you, Myra. I appreciate it.
Initially, when we had said we were going to do the CARES grant, we did tell you all it was going to be for 2 years. And I pleaded with FTA. FTA would not give us 2 years. They would only give us the 18 months. So the grants are all January 20 through 2020 through June 30th of 2021. That's the maximum amount of time they will allow us on our grant.
And that would be for both phase 1 and phase 2, because phase 2 is an
amendment. That is correct.
Okay, so the next question is, what is ADTAP? ADTAP is the Appalachian Development Public Transportation Assistance Program. If you receive that funding, you would receive it normally in a normal year as well. There was an additional set aside through CARES for that funding as well. There's like 25-ish, 24 systems that received that funding. Is there a possibility to still provide feedback? I know your team was meeting some other major demands at the time and couldn't meet the quick turnaround. Yes, if you've got information on the funding survey, as I indicated before, we're going to continue to be requesting that information. We have already submitted the results to upper management based on what we had received prior to the deadline, but we can continue to refine that, and I will say that I would love to have 100% participation, just so we have another snapshot of how systems are being impacted. Since our cost per trip have increased for this fiscal year due to reduced capacity on a vehicle, should we recalculate our operating expense cost and claim a higher reimbursement rate for grant trip reimbursement normally would use? For example, a typical rate is closer to the demand response operating expenses as shown on the NTD annual agency profile, etc. I'm not sure I can answer that question. I mean, basically, if you can, with respect to the CARES Act, it's actual expenses, for operations. So when it comes to submitting your reimbursement, you just need to show that. When it comes to, your calculation of your cost, I think we'll just have to defer that and we can research that a little bit later. The funds from DHHS expire on December 31st, 2020. Once the MOU is signed into agreement, how quickly will eligible systems be notified that they can file claims against these funds, or will these funds be eligible for a POP extension? Again, it's a little bit different because their funds are different than our CARES Act funding. As soon as we are aware of this funding being available, once we got the agreements in place, we will hopefully have some, additional details with respect to that funding. My hope would be that it would be distributed very similarly to traditional rope, where you're given the money and then you just have to show eligible expenses. But we will have to be able to review claims, for that funding. So I wish I had more details. We're still trying to hammer out how it's going to work operationally. They've got some flexibilities that we don't, and vice versa. So it's because even though it's CARES Act money, there are some differences to how the money can be distributed. Will the 5311 CARES Act grant pay for radios needed in our dispatch office? We needed the upgrade due to employees having to work from home during COVID. Just wondering, since they are including operations in the grant, will the 5311 CARES Act grant pay for radios? That's repeated. So I guess, Blair, when you get up there, you can delete the second thing. Thank you. The answer to that is for phase 1 and phase 2, it's operations, it's not capital. Radios would be considered capital. If you've got a need like that you expect to have capital, we will be doing, our third phase of funding, and that should capture both operations, additional operational support for COVID, as well as any capital investments needed for COVID. Just to remind you, we had hoped that third tranche of money would be available for capital investments overall. It is not looking as likely that that's going to be able to happen. But so what I'm asking you to do is start thinking about what investments you have done during this period of COVID that have been capital expenditures. Keep note of those, so that way, again, it will be retroactive to the beginning of the eligibility period, which is January 20th. But you'll have to put in that request for capital during that third needs-based application period. Let's see where I'm at. Here we go. When are we going to receive CARES Act 5307 agreements? We process them to the point that we can until we get approval from 5307 GA for FTA. We can't go any further. So as soon as we get that agreement from FTA, those that are at that fourth level of review will be sent out. When are we going to receive our fiscal year 2021 5311 and 5339 agreements? I'll have to get back to you, and I don't have a date for that either. Has the fiscal year 21-53 admin grant been approved? And when can we expect the signed agreement? That's the same question. So we will follow up with that question for you guys. How you decided on the time length for the training sessions? I assume you mean the 1 to 2 hours. It really depends on the content that we're trying to cover. So some sessions will be shorter just because of the subject matter, and some will be, longer because of the subject matter. So the schedule will be, we are starting it at 10 o'clock to be consistent in that respect. But beyond that, it's just how long it's going to take us to get through the content. Can urban systems request masks? At this point, we have satisfied all of the demands of the 5311 systems at this point. So yes, you can submit requests to us for those additional masks. As a demand response provider, we don't normally charge riders fares except for the 2% rope requirement. Since the second round of funding is offsetting the loss of rope and allows CARES funding to be used to cover, could we continue to require riders to pay a small fare if trips would have been qualified for rope? You can. I mean, you can continue to do whatever fare structure you would normally do. I just encourage you again that if you're going to be charging any fares, during this period of time, to include that in your supplemental so that you can maximize the drawdown of all of your CARES Act funding. If we believe the fares we put in the original CARES application are correct, do we need to add fares in on the change request? Wouldn't that be taking them out twice? Yes, you do not need to. You just need to make sure that your total fares covers that entire period of performance that was outlined in the slides. This is just your opportunity to increase that if you think it's going to have changed. If we only charge passengers fares for DOT and RGP, do we need to put anything in fares expected to be collected since we no longer have rope funds? If we only charge, that's the same thing again. So the answer is, if you're going to be charging fares, if you're bringing in fares during this period of time, just make sure to include it in your supplemental. I am trying to place my second CARES claim, but when I try to submit a claim, it says claim cannot be submitted until pending CR has been completed. Is that because my change request is submitted a couple weeks back has not been processed? Myra, I don't know about the error, but I'm going to guess that is the error you would be getting if you try to submit a claim while you have a change request made. Can you confirm?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And I want to speak on that.
Sure.
So we have several change requests that are pending and outstanding in our workflow. So until we receive the signed supplemental agreement back from the transit agency and it's signed by our deputy secretary, we will not be able to proceed and move forward and process those change requests. So again, once we get the signed supplemental agreement back from your agency, our deputy secretary has to sign it. And at that point, we will attach it to the change request and approve it in workflow. Then you will be able to submit a new claim, and at the same time, your new supplemental amount will be added to the original amount on your claim form. So those of you that have not submitted a change request, it's very important that you get those in right away. That way you're coming in for your additional funds, and also we're able to submit that supplemental agreement out to you. That's all I have.
Yep, thank you, Myra. So again, it kind of goes back to the whole, you can't submit a claim if you've got a change request in, and it is not instantaneous. Just like with any other change request, there is time that needs to be taken by both you guys signing the supplemental as well as us signing to make it official on our end. My prior notes indicate that if CARES grant funds have not been spent by 6/30/2021, we can request an extension. Is that accurate? CARES grants funds do not expire. So I would imagine there should be an extension, a period performance extension. What Myra was saying earlier is that, while we requested a period of performance of 2 years for the initial grant award, we were only given 18 months. But the CARES Act funds do not expire until fully expended. Do we need to also include projected fares with our AdTap application? It's all going to be kind of, it's a different application. So if you are, I think it depends on whether you typically would be, where you're counting them. So if you counted them all on your initial CARES Act funding, just make sure that all of your fares are going to be accounted for in either one or all of the tranches. So you can spread it out, or you can do it all.
Answer the question.
Yep.
The answer is yes. If you are, it's for operating. AdTap Fit Cares that's going out is for operating only. So if you're providing trips and you're collecting fares, then yes, you will need a contra account. You will need to complete F511 on the application, or should have completed F511 on your application to account for your fares.
Thank you, Myra.
You're welcome.
Is the period of performance for 5307 CARES only going to be for 18 months or a 24-month POP? This is very important, especially since we haven't received the 5307 CARES contracts and can't claim any expenses yet. Myra, do you know what the period of performance deadline was for 5307 that we submitted?
I'm not sure. Tammy's on the call and she completed the application. Tammy. If not, I can look it up and I can get back with you.
Yeah, we will post that response if Tammy's not able to answer it quickly. When will concept grant agreements go out? Again, I'm not 100% sure. We will go ahead and all of those agreement dates, we will research those and give you guys a updated timeline. What is the application deadline for AdTap? Myra, do we have a deadline?
We have not set a deadline, but if you all can get them in as soon as possible, it's actually 22 transit systems. And if you all can get them in within the next 2 weeks, the contracts are already ready to go out. Just the applications have not been put into the system. So the sooner you can get your applications in and get them reviewed, we can have the contracts out to you.
So, again, it's we're not going to, just like with the other 8 systems that haven't submitted their final applications or final agreements, it's your ability to get your money. So we're not going to hold you to a deadline with respect to that. The Board of Transportation was planning to adopt a new cash flow model. Was that adopted at the September Board of Transportation meeting? And if so, are funding agreements being executed? Any new information on this cash flow model? It's a good question. They were working on adopting our cash spend targets. They basically deferred that to the October board meeting. So we do not at this point have any official numbers. That being said, we are looking at trying to move forward on some of the funding agreements being executed. Just to remind those of you who maybe don't recall from last call or the last time we talked about this, if it is a project for which it is 100% federal, so obviously CARES Act funding falls under that umbrella, those projects are moving forward, have already been moving forward. If there is any state funding that is associated with those federal funds, it has to go through a process. That process is being refined and updated as we go along. But my understanding is those ones that are both state and federal funded, so there's a mixed funding there, are starting to move forward. 5310 claims are based on trips performed. It sounds like DHHS claims will also be based on trips performed. How is the cost of operations, fuel, maintenance, salary, etc. claimed with the CARES if some of the trips have already been claimed? I'm going to have to get back to you on that again. You know, it's how, you know, obviously a trip can only be claimed under one funding source than another. We'll just have to provide more information for that for the DHHS money as we move forward. To whom do we submit requests for masks? Blair put the application up there on the smart sheet. Can we pay for marketing with CARES funding? Myra or Tammy, do you know if that comes under operations?
Tammy, yes, it does.
So the answer is yes, you can pay for marketing with CARES Act funding. When were the supplemental agreements sent out?
For the CARES, this is Myra. We started sending those out as of yesterday.
So it all depends on whether the application has been, you know, submitted and the review completed. What is the signed supplemental agreement? So after you put your application in, that generates a supplemental agreement, which we will send out to the systems. You need to sign that and return it to us. We have it signed by our management, and then it is attached to the change request. Is the signed supplemental agreement something I need to request, or will it come automatically after the change request is entered?
No. The signed supplemental agreement is an addendum to the current existing CARES contract that you've already received. So that will go out to you once we've done the internal review. We are sending those via DocuSign, and we started sending them out as of yesterday.
So you do not have to request it. It will be sent out automatically.
It'll come out to you, and you just have to get the signatures as you had originally routed your original contract. We have to have the same signatures.
Okay. Is the DHHS money simply available for Tier 1 counties only? The answer to that is yes. It is Tier 1 counties only. Those who are eligible for that funding have been notified via email, not only of their eligibility, but also their anticipated amount. Can you provide some further guidance if we pull salaries down with CARES and still have 5310 funding that we pull down by mileage, how to separate that? We'll have to, yes, we can look into that and provide an answer to that. Building on the rope question from earlier, does this mean that CARES funding can be used to cover trips that were done under rope 5310? Is the difference that these trips must be open to the public? Yes. So that's a point of confusion that has existed for a while. If there were trips that were funded previously under 5310 or rope that are general public trips, or you can convert them into general public trips, then they can be eligible for CARES Act funding. The only trips that cannot be eligible for with CARES Act funding are those trips for which, you know, it's a special trip that is maybe like a, you know, going from one spot to another, like a nursing home to a hospital, for instance, you know, a regular route or a regular trip that you provided where there aren't general public who are, you know, riding on there, or it's an educational opportunity where you're busing people for training from one location to another. So if you can call it a general public trip, even if it was funded previously under 5310 or ROPE, it should be eligible under CARES Act. We very much appreciate you pushing the FTA to allow for a 24-month POP for 5311 CARES. I think I didn't hear the response correctly regarding the reasoning for the the June date deadline, and I know I'm going to need to explain that locally. If the CARES funds don't expire, is there an 18-month expiration for NCDOT? It's a good question. We'll have to find out.
That's all FTA will give us at a time on a grant. They said they've never allowed that length of time on the community transportation grant. So that was the response they gave me. Trust me, I fought for you guys.
So I guess what I'm hearing Myra say, and I would encourage you to talk to your constituents about, is, you know, it is what it is. It's 18 months. The legislation for CARES says the money doesn't expire. So FTA is going to have to do, you know, if there's money left over at the end of that 18 months, something is going to have to be able to be done for us to be able to access those funds. Whether that's closing them out and reissuing new grants, I don't know.
So I'm not saying FTA is going to close our grant. That's a maximum amount of time they will allow us for what I'm saying, like for this period, for this first time. I don't know why. That's what they gave me. So at June 30th, 2021, I'm sure there's going to be money remaining. I believe they will allow us this additional time. Just as of right now, that's the most time they will give us for now. So we're responsible for reporting quarterly to FTA for our MPRs and our FFRs. So at that time, as we're reporting, we can update in the system to see where we are. So I actually believe we will go beyond the June 30th of 2021 date to spend this money.
Thanks, Myra. So I guess the takeaway that I'm hearing from what Myra is saying is, you know, try not to fixate too much on the June 30th deadline, knowing that the CARES Act funds don't expire. There'll have to be some concessions that can be made. An application for the second round of CARES Act funding. Where is that application? So for the second round of CARES Act funding, it's a change request. It's not an actual application. So you need to go in like you would normally do a change request. The only other application that we have open right now is for the ADTAP funds. And that would be, I think that's up in the system at this point right now. How do you know what tier you are? There is a map and a listing of what tier counties they are. Tier counties are based on a lot of things, but primarily tier 1 counties are the more economically depressed counties. And those are, you know, if you wanted to search for those, you could do a Google search for tier 1 North Carolina counties, and that will show you which counties are tier 1 counties. If you are a 5311 system with a contractor providing trips, the recipient only provides rope trips. There are no funds to provide these trips because of no rope distribution. How do you proceed? If I'm reading this correctly, and you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, CARES Act funding can be used to support contractors providing trips. The issue comes whether the trips are 5311 eligible. So again, if these were originally being funded through ROPE, if there's a way for you to make them rural general public, they should be eligible to receive CARES Act funding. If you are unable to make them 5311 rural general public, then they will not be CARES Act eligible. And this is one of those holes that we are trying to identify with this information that we've requested from you. So if you're in a situation where you have trips that are ROPE trips that were previously funded under ROPE that you cannot convert, or that are not fundable under rural general public, please let us know. Not that we have not that we can generate ROPE, because we can't, but at least we will be able to better identify where these holes will be. And let's see if that's the last question. Nope. All right. All right, so the trips are 5311 eligible. CARES Act funding is after the fact. I don't have the funds to pay the contractor up front. What do I do? I would hope that the contractor, would be, knowing that there was reimbursement. I do realize that one of the differences with CARES Act funding versus ROPE funding is that you were given your ROPE in one lump sum. But I don't know how to advise you to proceed, because there is not ROPE this year. That is one of the limitations that had not been identified, and so we can certainly make that distinction, excuse me, between when the funds are distributed aware. My understanding, again, is that we are processing these CARES Act claims, as quickly as we can. And we are allowing you to submit, at least monthly. So, if between, are allowing you to submit more frequently than quarterly, and, conversations with the contractors, I would hope that there would be some way to do some resolution. Is there an overview document for the AdTap grant? I could not find it on the Connect NCDOT website. I do not know the answer to that question, but we'll follow up with that after the call. As a 5311 recipient, do you have to provide RGP trips? Those are the only trips we have ever provided. I mean, rural general public trips. I mean, if you're doing rural general public trips, then you're eligible. So I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking. All right. Oops. We participated in the NC Transit Cares Work on It meeting today, and there was info presented about passenger driver safety, the benefits of masking, airflow, etc. There were questions that still weren't answered. Can y'all answer a few or forward these on to the presenters today from UNC Grilling School? The answer to that is we will forward the questions on. The questions that are on here is, has the FTA NCDOT provided any guidance regarding whether or not our drivers should open windows and or use outside AC versus recirculated air conditioning? So we will definitely forward this on to give you a more official response. However, when we were in conversations with the speaker today, he did indicate that one of the best things you could do is open windows. Obviously, as we are approaching cooler weather, that's going to make it a little bit difficult. I'm not aware necessarily of how buses work. Obviously, I don't know whether your recirculated air, if it goes through a filter, or whether it's just, recirculating cabin air. So a lot of those questions about, AC versus recirculated AC really kind of boils down to it's going to be vehicle specific. Obviously, if there's a filtration system on the recirculated air, that would be beneficial. But when it comes to, driver exposure, which is obviously one of the things that he was of concern with on today's call, is increasing airflow to the driver. By cracking the driver's side window or what have you, is one way of creating a dilution effect of the virus. So let's see. Second question was, currently we have plexiglass set up around the driver's area, but not any in the passenger seating area. To improve safety, social distancing of passengers, we have made the decision to sharply reduce total capacity of vans. But this restriction is causing us to have to deny many trips due to limitations with total vehicles and drivers that can provide service. Would adding plexiglass dividers between seats on the back of each seat mean that we could put one person in each row or every other row staggered from side to side perspective? Or would plexiglass dividers just be something that looks good and does provide a limited barrier, but the time spent in the vehicle and distance to others are still the guiding factors? So we should keep a max limit on riders to ensure exposure parameters of 6 feet separation in 15 minutes. Boy, that's a great question. And we have actually requested, today's presentation talked about the exposure level of the driver. We have actually asked them to look into the exposure of a passenger. If you were on today's call, you would have seen that, one of the greatest things you can do on par with the social distancing of 6 feet is wearing a mask of both the riders, basically everyone wearing a mask is one of the best things that can be done in addition to reduce exposure. So there's a lot of things that can be done, reducing the duration of a trip, requiring masking, obviously social distancing, all of those things kind of work together to improve safety. But once we get that modeling results for the passengers back, we will be certainly sure to share that with you all. Question number 3, there has been a lot of talk about potential use of UV light versus spray chemicals to disinfect vehicles for multiple positive reasons, but we've also heard that UV has an issue with breaking down the material in seats and only sanitizes the surfaces it touches. I don't know. We can certainly, look into that with respect to, cleaning. Does FTA NCDOT have any concerns about using spray disinfectant and the long-term effects of the chemicals causing breakdowns on seats, seatbelts, and other surfaces? Again, that's a question, great question. I don't know that there is a lot of long-term research being done on these effects, but we can certainly reach out to others who may have some information. So, in clarification to a previous question, the contract provides trips for other agencies. The 5311 recipient only provides RGP trips. Is this a requirement for us to continue receiving funds? This is Grona with Wilson. I had a conflict with today's earlier session and couldn't make it. More to follow. Yeah, thanks, Grona. We may be reaching out to you to share some additional information on the on that. We'll have to get back to you on this. I know we've had discussions about the eligibility for Wilson specifically, and we'll try to get some resolution and reach out to you directly. My understanding is that we can use the 5311 CARES and the 5307 CARES funds before regular 5311 and 5307. Please confirm that to be correct. The answer to that is yes. Anything that is during the period of performance of January 20th, through June of 2021, that is 5311 or 5307 operations can be used. Also, since the regular grants have special requirements for minimum expenditures, for example, on marketing and safety, do we need to make sure we at least spend claim expenses for those items in fiscal year 21? This would probably be a question that maybe you could answer, Myra. To keep a grant active, do they need to show at least some expenditures?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And it's not an amount, it's a frequency, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the answer is, if you've got a grant already awarded, a traditional FTA grant already awarded, you do need to submit at least some claims onto that grant to keep it active.
That is correct.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay, that appears to be the last question in the chat box currently. I think this may be a record for call duration. I do appreciate all of your interest with respect to participating in today's call. For those questions that we were unable to answer during the call, we will generate the responses and post those onto our webpage. But I thank you all for your time and opportunity to share information with you today. Thanks and have a great day.